We continue right here. It is the Jake Asman Show, and joining us right now on our progressive guest line to talk a little bit of fantasy football and maybe about his Texas A&M Aggies is the fantasy guru over at ESPN. Matthew Berry joins the show. Matthew, appreciate the time, man. And since you are on in Houston, we are the official station of Texas A&M football. I guess I got to start off by saying gig 'em, right?
Gigamags. Listen, listen. No one likes. I think A&M got hosed last year. They should have been in the college football playoff. But I'm very excited about what Jimbo Fisher has done with the program, and I think we're headed in the right direction.
No doubt. So, let's kind of start big picture with you because I've followed your career for a long time. And I still think it's unbelievable that you have a full-time job and you've had one for so many years where you break down fantasy, not just during the season, but year round. When did you realize that, you could actually have a career covering fantasy sports?
It's sort of crazy. I think I wanted to go for it in 2005. I've been playing since, I'm embarrassed to say, but I've been playing since 1984. I grew up in College Station, Texas, so just down the road, and been playing since '84. I've been writing about it professionally since 1999, and I had this site that I was working on the side, and I was making a living elsewhere. I was actually a Hollywood screenwriter, believe it or not. And in 2005, I had this website that was doing well. It was a blog called Talented Mr. Roto, which was my nickname, and I wanted to sort of try to make a career of it. And so I said to my writing partner, let's write one last movie together, bank the money, because I'm going to try to make a go of this fantasy football thing. The idea that I would ever be able to make a full-time living at it, was I tried to go for it in 2005, but I probably didn't realize that it was going to happen for me until 2007 when ESPN came to me and said, I'd been doing some work for them, some ESPN Radio, Cold Pizza, if you remember that show, writing for ESPN, the magazine. And in 2007, ESPN came to me and said, we think fantasy football is now big enough that we need somebody on air to talk about it. We need a Mel Kiper. We need to find the Mel Kiper of fantasy football. And we think that could be you. So we'd like to buy your website, move you to Connecticut, and make you the guy. And we'll give you a 2-year concert, and we'll try it out. We'll see how it goes. And at the end of my current contract with the company, I've been with ESPN for 17 years. So it's worked out pretty well.
I'd say so. So when did you realize, I guess, when you first started with ESPN that, hey, fantasy football is not just here, but I mean, it is going to explode? Because I don't think fantasy football has ever been more popular. Just, talking to my friends about our league every year is one of the highlights of our summer when we get together for the annual fantasy draft. Like, when did you realize, or maybe you always knew, that fantasy football was just going to be this thing that just really captivates, even if you're not a diehard football fan, chances are you still might want to play fantasy football?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'd honestly say probably like 2008, 2009, in that range. Honestly, once, part of my job was to sort of come into ESPN and try to, like I met with every SportsCenter producer, every NFL Live, every Baseball Tonight, every radio producer, on and on and on. Here's what fantasy is. Here's why it's important to our fans. Here's how it can help the company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, obviously, some people here obviously knew it. There were a lot of people that were big fantasy players internally at the company, but others weren't as educated about it. And so I think once ESPN decided as a company to get behind it in a big way, and they really did, you saw some of the sports league get behind it. You saw other media companies sort of jump on board as well. And that was when I think sort of the narrative changed from, oh, this is this nerdy, weird thing that people do in their basements, all those bad jokes. And it became, and this is something I always would talk about internally at ESPN, I would say, like, listen, it needs to be something that just people do, right? We all fill out a March Madness bracket. We all go to a bar like a Buffalo Wild Wings to watch the games. Like, we all go out to Vegas, right? For a bachelor party. Like, it's one of those things that you do. And you draft a fantasy team. It's just something that everyone that's a sports fan does, right? You tailgate before the game. You fill out a March Madness bracket. You go to you go to B-Dubs, and you draft a fantasy team. Like, it's just something people do. And that's where I think the narrative started to change in 2008.
Absolutely. Matthew Berry from ESPN with us here talking all things fantasy football. Matthew, when it comes to fantasy football for this season, for people that are getting set to start their draft, what would be your biggest piece of advice you'd give to anyone that's sitting down getting ready for their first fantasy football draft?
Their first one this year or their first one ever?
Just their first one this year. I'm going to assume that most people by now at some point have probably played fantasy football.
So then what I would say there is that to me, what is knowing sort of the positions and understanding how you want to construct your team. At quarterback, I think it's really important to have a mobile quarterback. 8 of the top 10 quarterbacks last year had at least 200 yards rushing. Right? It's important to get a quarterback that gets you fantasy points with their arm and their legs. By the way, that doesn't include Jalen Hurts or Taysom Hill, who were both top 10 fantasy quarterbacks when they were starters for the Eagles and Saints, respectively, last year, or Dak Prescott, who would have been top 10 had he not gotten injured. I think at running back, you want to go to try to get a bell cow running back earlier in your draft and then some upside guys late. The middle rounds are really meant for wide receivers. Wide receiver is very deep this year. You can wait a little bit on wide receiver. And for tight end, I either want to be one of the first people in my league to draft a tight end, a Kelsey, a Waller, a Kittle, or one of the last people in my league to draft a tight end, because there's a little bit of a sameness towards the end there. And so I think some of the middle guys, I really like Logan Thomas. I think Mark Andrews could have a big year, and Hawkinson. But ultimately, I want to be one of the first guys in my league or one of the last to draft a tight end this year.
When do you decide when to pull the trigger on the quarterback? Because that's always a debate that I know fantasy football players have, right? Do you go right away and you just grab Mahomes because he's the shiny toy in fantasy sports? Or, is there so much depth at the quarterback spot that maybe it's smart to kind of wait on the QB?
Yeah, I think somewhere in between, Jake, to be honest with you. There's enough depth at the position that you can wait, but you don't want to wait too long. Again, we just talked about mobile quarterbacks. I think the perception is like, there's so many good quarterbacks, I'll just wait and get one. But the truth is that having a good quarterback is the new mediocre, because everyone has a good quarterback. So it's just sort of but there's more of a difference now between the elite tier and just sort of the good above average guys. And so I think it's important, again, to get one of those mobile quarterbacks, whether it's a Kyler Murray or a Josh Allen, you mentioned Mahomes, obviously, but Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson had over 500 yards last year. People don't realize this. Justin Herbert had 5 rushing touchdowns last year. People don't realize this. So a quarterback that can get you points with your legs and your arms, I think is important. I really like Trey Lance and Justin Fields as sleepers later in your draft, because those guys will become starters at some point this year.
Matthew Berry with us here. So this is very much a self-serving question, Matthew, but I am a diehard fan of the New York Jets. And, for a while, the Jets never had decent skill position players for fantasy purposes. This year, though, I look at Corey Davis, Elijah Moore. Is there anyone from my beloved New York Jets that you would recommend drafting in fantasy?
Yeah, I think Corey Davis, you mentioned him. You're seeing the kind of target share he's getting in the preseason. People forget this is a guy that went in the top 5 overall. He was a first-round draft pick. Slow start to his career, but very productive recently in Tennessee. Follow the money, right? He gets signed to a big deal for the Jets, comes there. That's a team that I think is actually heading in the right direction. I like what Joe Douglas and his staff have put together, but I think it's still going to be a rebuilding year for the Jets. But what I will say is they're going to be throwing a lot. It's a bad defense. And so I think Zach Wilson will be good enough to get the ball to Corey Davis. You mentioned Elijah Moore. The rookie is super tantalizing, but he's been banged up. My expectation is it's been Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, and Jamison Crowder in the slot is their starting 3. Crowder and Moore are both interesting, but if I have to pick a Jet skill position player to start this year, give me Corey Davis.
There you go. Finally, a New York Jet actually getting on someone's radar for fantasy purposes. Matthew Berry, of course, with us here, the ESPN fantasy expert himself. Final question, then we got to get to your awesome partnership here with Buffalo Wild Wings. What was it like to be in the Avengers? I mean, you got to live out the dream that I'm sure so many people would love to have been a part of. You had a cameo in the movie Avengers. First off, how did that happen, and what was that experience like?
It happened thanks to fantasy football, actually. Joe Russo, the director, along with his brother Anthony, the Russo brothers. Joe Russo's a big fantasy football player. He's like in 4 leagues, including one with me now. And we had a mutual friend. So, I got a call saying like, hey, Joe Russo wants your phone number. Can I give it to him? I'm like, I'm sorry, Joe Russo, as in Joe and Anthony Russo, who directed Captain America: Winter Soldier, like one of my favorite movies of all time. Yes, you can give him my phone number. Anyway, we just started texting and talking on the phone. We just became friends. We had some dinners and hung out, and we started playing in fantasy leagues together. And then just out of the blue, he calls me up and says, "Hey, listen, man, I'm down here in Atlanta shooting Avengers: Infinity War and Endgame back to back. I got a part that I think you're perfect for. You want to be in the movie?" And, yes. And so I've decided to take it as a compliment. I think you could take it either way, but I've decided to take it as a compliment. He's just like, "Yeah, I think you look like a SHIELD agent." So, which is what I play in the movie. And, in terms of what it was like, it was amazing. Everyone could not have been more gracious. There's literally there's a frame of the movie. There's like a moment in the movie where all you see on screen is Robert Downey Jr., Chris Hemsworth, Robert Redford, and me. And you're like, it's the old Sesame Street thing. Like, one of these things isn't like the others. One of these things doesn't belong. But they could not have all been. They were all so gracious and welcoming to me. Really nice. I ended up with 4 lines in the movie. And Jake, I will tell you, so it's one of the greatest experiences of my life. Really enjoy it. Love talking about it. I'm a massive MCU fan. But I will just tell you that it is the highest grossing movie of all time worldwide. I've only appeared in one movie in my life. So, Jake, on a per movie basis, I am now the highest grossing actor of all time worldwide. Again, total box office, many people beat me. But, on a per movie basis, I've only got one, and it is the highest grossing movie of all time worldwide. So, yeah, I'm the highest grossing actor per movie of all time.
Numbers never lie. Numbers never lie, Matthew Berry.
Exactly.
Finally,
but it's a lot of fun, and if anyone has Disney Plus and wants to watch it, I'm about an hour and a half in. I'm in the New York scene when they get to New York.
I love it. You know exactly where you are in the movie as well. Let's wrap up with this, Matthew. I know you partnered up with Buffalo Wild Wings. A lot of people this time of year talking fantasy football. Maybe they want to do their fantasy football draft at B-Dubs. Tell us all about what you have going on with Buffalo Wild Wings.
I just like partnering with companies that are fantasy friendly. I've been in way too many drafts, Jake, where you go to a restaurant or a bar and like they're like the waitress doesn't know, and you're like, oh, let me see if I can shove a couple of chairs together and crowd here where it's going to be dark and you have to sit on the end and whatever. They get it, right? I mean, they get it. They literally have a whole section of their website devoted to fantasy football and drafts. If you just go to buffalowildwings.com/fantasy, you can learn all about all the offers. But just give you one example, like they cater to the commissioner. Like if you go to Buffalo Wild Wings and have your fantasy draft there, the commissioner gets a free appetizer the rest of the NFL season on Sundays when he comes in to watch the games with his league. Like just like a little love for the commissioner, because we all know that's the worst job in fantasy. So I appreciate that. They can obviously, if you're having a draft at home, they obviously have a lot of great packages as well in terms of getting you food and getting you wings and burgers and chips and everything you need to make a party successful. But I just like working with them because they get it. They're a fantasy friendly company.
He's Matthew Berry. You heard him. Check out Buffalo Wild Wings. Go to buffalowildwings.com/fantasy to book your draft or, of course, place your takeout order. Matthew, this was a ton of fun, man. Great to catch up again. Appreciate your time. And, good luck to you with fantasy football this year because I'm sure you're playing in thousands upon leagues. And, people expect the fantasy expert to, of course, win all those leagues.
I appreciate it, Jake. Listen, I got the best job in America, so I feel very blessed and it's great to see your career. I met you when you were a college kid, and look at you now in Houston, near my where I grew up. So congratulations on all your success.
I appreciate it. Matthew Berry has been our guest. We'll take a quick break and continue. This is the Jake Asman Show. We're coming right back.